Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who've died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. Tonight we're going to start out with this.
His name's Jaws. He kills people.
Well, actually, his name wasn't Jaws. It was Richard Kiel, and he died recently at the age of 74. And next to the James Bond character himself, he's probably the most remembered and recognized character in the James Bond films. He was in two of them, Moonraker and The Spy Who Loved Me. Richard Kiel suffered from acromegaly. He was 7 feet 1 3/4 inches. They listed him as 7'2". And actually, he was a nice guy in real life, despite the fierce character he played in The Spy Who Loved Me. They sort of softened up his character in Moonraker. But as I said, there's probably no villain or other character besides the James Bond characters who people remember and love so much, and that's why they brought him back. He was known for these steel teeth that could basically bite through anything. That was his gimmick. And here, late in life, he talks about the steel teeth on British TV.
Played by Richard Kiel. It's lovely to see you, Richard.
Nice to be here, Ruth.
Where's your teeth?
What happened
Well,
to
they're in
them?
a museum here in the UK. I signed a bunch of replica sets, and they gave me one for each of my children and each of my grandchildren. So that's 10 sets. They were made out of chrome. They were cast by a dental technician. You can only make one set. They wanted like half a dozen spares in case they got stolen or broken. So every night they went into a safe.
It's a tree that made you gag.
They sure did. They went up in the roof of your mouth. If you imagine like chrome, swallowing a bumper or a car. And I could only have them in for like 1 or 2 minutes.
So painful as well, were they?
They weren't painful, just gagging.
But how did you actually act out a film scene then?
Well, I just got through it, looked a little stoic. There was the tooth lady with a Tupperware container standing by. And as soon as the director said, cut, print, out they came into the Tupperware.
Well, Jaws was Richard Kiel's feature role, but he did a lot of television, some other movies. But his most memorable television role was as on the lead candidate in the famous Twilight Zone episode To Serve Man. Here's the famous snip from that episode where the Earthlings figure out that the book that the aliens brought down that they decoded as To Serve Man was actually a cookbook.
We've looked the title anyway.
What does it say? How much does it tell us?
Here it is.
Well, that makes the cheese a little more binding, wouldn't you say, Colonel? I'd call that a reasonably altruistic phrase. You agree, Patty?
Well, I want to believe it, but I don't know what to think.
To serve man. I hope so.
This is flight number 914 from Earth to our planet. We will be taking off in 3 minutes.
Mr. Chambers! Mr. Chambers! Don't get on that ship! Rest of the book, To Serve Man, it's a cookbook!
No! 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 No!
But it doesn't make very much difference because sooner or later, will all of us be on the menu. All of us.
Yeah, so Richard Kiel's going to get a nice meal out of Lloyd Bochner. We're going to move on now to Marvin Bad News Barnes, who died recently at 62. He probably had the greatest squandered talent to talent ratio I've ever seen in basketball. He was a superb basketball player, probably the greatest player to ever come out of Rhode Island, the greatest player to ever play at Providence College. He took them to the NCAA Final Four in 1973 along with Ernie DiGregorio, and they might have won if he hadn't gotten injured. They lost to Memphis State. He was the second player drafted for Bill Walton, but he went to the ABA to play with the St. Louis Spirits. He did play a little while in the NBA, and he could have been a great player. The problem was, he was a jerk. His nickname Bad News comes from the fact that he once hit a teammate with a tire iron. Here's Providence Television on Marvin Barnes.
Well, he will go down as the greatest Friar big man to ever put on a PC uniform, but just like his basketball career, Marvin Barnes' life ended way too soon. The basketball legend died today at a home in Providence at just 62 years old, and Barnes is arguably the most talented basketball player to ever come out of the state of Rhode Island. But as talented as he was on the court, he had his fair share of issues off the court that date back to his high school days at Central. Marvin rose to fame after a stellar high school career, followed by an All-American career at PC, where he led the Friars to the 1973 Final Four. He was the second overall draft selection in the 1974 NBA draft, but chose to play in the ABA instead for the Spirits of St. Louis. Barnes would later play for 4 NBA teams, including the Boston Celtics, but his career ended early due to a number of issues with drugs. And some of his former teammates told me how good Marvin really was.
He was a monster. You know, he won the ABA, played for the Spirits of St. Louis, had some nice documents on that film document on ESPN. But you look at what he did. I mean, he scored 50 points in 3 of those games against Dr. J. I mean, this is Dr. J. This isn't like your run-of-the-mill forward in the NBA.
I said a lot of guys that he played with, he had part of his competitiveness was his big heart. That's why he was such a great teammate, great friend, and I miss him very much.
And Providence College remembered Barnes today, sending me this statement this afternoon. They read, quote, Providence College community was saddened to learn of the passing of former basketball great Marvin Barnes, class of 1972. Barnes has always been regarded as one of the greatest basketball players in the history of Providence College.
Marvin's one of those guys who said he turned his life around late in life. Here's an interview with him.
A wise man learns from others' mistakes. A fool learns from his own. I had to learn from my own mistakes.
Of course, he didn't learn from his own mistakes. He got in trouble again with underage girls and drugs and everything like that. But he was a superb basketball player. Here's a little snip from him from the ABA, and if the announcer sounds familiar, you should. It's a young Bob Costas.
Jack Madden and Joe Belmont, the officials. Here is Marvin Barnes from the right sideline and hitting. As he picks up where he left off, he cranked up 40 shots on Sunday night and hit exactly half of them, making 20 field goals and 9 of 10 from the free throw line for a total of 49. The Spirits' season high last year. Marvin had 54 against Memphis, which is the Spirits' individual record. Gilmore in the lane has it slapped away and stolen by M.L. Carr. He brings the dribble out on a 4-on-2, dishes to Barnes, who lays it in. Blake Barnes missing inside, but he was fouled, but more coming for last year's ABA Rookie of the Year. Ball is in play as he puts this one in the air and in the bucket. Defensive player. He spotted Lucas for the easy bucket. Here is Barnes, top of the key. Off to CJ. His jumper is good. 5 on the front court. Marvin, 18-foot jumper. Bang! A hot hand. This one goes off the back rim. Rebound taken by Jones. Into the front court. Mike Barr out of the corner. Foul line Marvin. He fakes. He jumps. He hits. Rolled around the rim and fell in. Boone off the dribble to the baseline. He feeds to Marvin, who goes up in a crowd and hits. That move by Barnes is one he has patented. Boone at the foul line. Gives to Marvin for the jump. Yes. Marvin Barnes is on fire. He has scored 33.
Costas loved Marvin Barnes. One time they were traveling from Virginia to St. Louis, and Marvin asked him what time they were leaving Virginia. He said 6 p.m. He said, what time are we getting into St. Louis? He said 6 p.m. Marvin asked him how we doing that, and Costas explained him the time zones, and Marvin said, I'm not getting on any time machine. Here's a little bit of that 30 on 30 where they talk about Marvin Barnes and the St. Louis Spirit. And the business deal they're talking about is the St. Louis Spirit was one of the ABA teams that was not folded into the NBA because they preferred to take a cut of the television deal. At the time, it was only a couple $100,000. It gradually morphed into millions each year. So every year, the owners of the St. Louis Spirit got millions of dollars without putting a team on the field. It was the greatest deal in sports history. I think they bought it out for about $500 million recently, but it was an absolutely brilliant deal by the owners of the St. Louis Spirit. Marvin Barnes opens up this snippet in characteristic fashion.
I always wanted to be a gangster, a drug dealer, a pimp, a player, a hustler.
Marvin picks it up and stuffs it to Marvin. Pretty play. 2 for Marvin Barnes. One-hand jump up and in.
Marvin Barnes and the Spirits of St. Louis existed for only 2 short years.
The Spirits are the NBA's 31st team.
They transformed both pro basketball and the business of pro sports.
Marvin, a jumper over Paul. Yeah!
The Spirits may be more relevant today than when the ABA folded 40 years ago.
It was almost like an all-star team.
We had a lot of guys that could play.
We had a chance to win it all with the talent we had on the team.
With 5, the jumper! Yes! Yes! He made it!
They had as much talent as anybody, but they would just self-destruct.
We didn't care about the game. We wondered where the next party was at, where that candy at, where them girls at.
I would send hookers to the hotel room with some of the greatest players in the game and say, drain them. Have sex with them till you can't move.
Marvin Barnes was a bad guy. He was accused of hitting one of his teammates with a tire iron.
He was thrown out for sucker punching opponents. His own teammate coined the nickname Bad News.
Marvin Barnes only cared about one person, Marvin Barnes.
One day out of the blue, he just disappeared.
He was gone, and for 10 days he was missing.
I remember saying to the owners, damn, I didn't know I was this good. I need more money.
For all the trouble that Marvin caused, I still wanted Marvin with me.
The short jump, Marvin. Yes, Barnes is on fire.
Compared to the NBA, the ABA was fabulous.
The league was in the entertainment business. If a fight would break out and you stayed on the bench, you were in big trouble.
The ABA began to fall apart, and either a merger was going to happen or we were going out of business.
The Spirits owners, they really wanted to be part of the NBA, and when that couldn't happen, they devised their own plan.
Hundreds of millions of dollars have flowed into the coffers of the Spirits of St. Louis.
It's like megabucks.
They have the greatest settlement in all of professional sports history.
If you wanted to take a single franchise that captured everything, just about everything, that was crazy about the ABA, look no further than the Spirits of St. Louis.
Marvin Barnes, definitely one of a kind. We're going to close tonight with Gerald Wilson, who died at the age of 96, and he was an all-around jazz performer. He was an arranger, a big band leader, a composer, and a trumpeter. And he goes way back to the 30s with Jimmie Lunceford. Gerald Wilson is one of the last pre-World War II jazz guys still around. He hooked up with Jimmie Lunceford in Detroit before the war, but as you'll hear in this NPR interview, he had a soft spot for Chicago, which was actually the first place he moved after he moved from Mississippi.
Gerald Wilson is a giant of jazz. He's written for and played with the orchestras of Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Benny Carter, and many more. You're born in Shelby, Mississippi.
Shelby, Mississippi, yes. My first time in Chicago was when I went to the World's Fair there in 1934. When I got to Chicago, I was thrilled by the fact that there were many things I could do in Chicago that I couldn't do at all in Shelby. And when I got back, I insisted to my mother that I want you to send me to Chicago so I can go to school there. She says, well, it's impossible for me to send you to Chicago, but I can send you to Detroit, Michigan. So I just said, well, as long as it's in the north, I want to go. So anyway, she sent me to Detroit, Michigan, and I stayed there in Detroit for 5 years and studied music there at one of the greatest schools in the United States. Yes, Cass Tech was second only to Juilliard in New York.
I can't restrain myself. I want to talk about your suite called Yes, Chicago Is.
Yes, Chicago Is.
We've got 7 short movements. Let's listen to a bit of the first one, A Jazz Mecca. Okay, that's the sun rising over Lake Michigan. Okay, it's just touching Grant Park now. It keeps going up. I think it's lighting along the skyscrapers along Michigan Avenue. Now it's reaching to Clark and Dearborn and North. That's what this music makes me think of.
You got it. When I'm gone, I want to leave something that someone likes and appreciates. You know, I just hope that the people will like it. You know, in music, you got to hope that the people will like it. If you write something that you're the only one that like it, that's not too good.
Well, I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer, Sid Taps. And my jazz expert, Bruce Dole, says of Gerald Wilson that he was his favorite West Coast big band. He played the Chicago Jazz Festival several times, and it was always great when Bruce saw him. He said he could do West Coast breezy that flowed above the crowd sound, but it also played with tons of energy. He had some roar. In the West Coast vein, we're going to close tonight with a song that Gerald Wilson did that was written by Ashford and Simpson. We covered it when we did the Nick Ashford podcast. I played it by Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell in the Fifth Dimension, but here's Gerald Wilson's jazz version of California Soul. Great song.